Last summer, I said it felt like the White House had hung a gong campaigning sign outside the Oval Office. President Obama didn't seem the least bit interested in passing serious bipartisan solutions for the middle class. It was all campaigning all the time. On the rarest of occasions, when he did come to Congress, it was for internal campaign rallies with his party. Well, it's actually only gotten worse. Since last summer, he's barely picked up the phone, and his bill signing pen is literally starting to rust. Here's the reason. This summer, the Democrat-controlled Senate seems to have put out a gone campaigning sign of its own. That's why the Democratic Senate has become a veritable graveyard of good ideas. Now, most people assume the purpose of the Senate is to pass legislation to help the American people. But these days, the Democrats who run the Senate seem to think their role is actually to just bury good legislation. They're more interested in pleasing their far-left political patrons who appear to oppose everything that could actually help the American middle class. Case in point, the Republican-led House of Representatives has already passed hundreds of pieces of legislation this Congress, legislation introduced by members of both parties, including dozens of jobs bills that remain stuck here in the Senate. That means President Obama hasn't had to sign or veto them, and the Senate Majority Leader has been all too happy to protect him, choosing between helping the far-left fringe and the vast American middle. In other words, Senate Democrats are on a mission this summer to obstruct solutions for the middle class at every turn and to prevent almost any serious legislating from occurring at all. At all. Over in the House, the minority party has been offered more than 160 votes on their amendments since last July. Here in the Senate, the Democratic leadership has blocked all but 9 Republican roll call votes. And it's not just Republican amendments getting squashed either. The Democrats who run the Senate are so scared of legislating these days that they're blocking virtually every amendment on both sides. It's gotten to the point where one House Democrat, a congresswoman from Texas, has now had twice as many roll call votes on amendments since last July, 15, as the entire Senate Democratic Conference combined. One member of the House and the minority party has had more votes than all of the Democratic senators combined over the last year. Between the 55 Senate Democrats, they've had 7 amendments in a year. In other words, the Majority Leader is treating his own conference even worse than he's treating us. Even committee work can no longer escape the Democratic majority's political obsession. The majority shut down the committee process on important legislation that could have been and would have been bipartisan, bills about patents and appropriations. This is the kind of stuff that makes Americans so very mad at Washington. I mean, how do you justify stifling the voices of so many senators and the tens of millions of Americans they were sent here to represent? It's indefensible. And it's gotten worse and worse under current Democratic leaders. Of course, every now and then, when we push hard enough, we're able to force our Democratic friends to allow a few bipartisan ideas to go through, like the Job Training and Workforce Development bill we expect to pass tomorrow. But boy, that's the rare exception around here, a very rare exception. Instead, we usually just see the game playing on important issues. On energy, Democratic leadership blocks every attempt to provide relief to blue-collar families who've been bulldozed by the administration's elitist war on coal jobs. They won't let us help the millions of Americans who struggle every single day with high utility bills. And they won't allow a serious vote on shovel-ready projects like the Keystone Pipeline either. Senate Democrats have blocked just about every effort to move forward on these issues. And in so doing, the Democratic leadership actually embarrasses the handful of Democratic senators who still call for action on energy and Keystone. Even veteran members who chair committees It just shows what little influence those members actually have under the current Democratic leadership. And it all lays a bare, simple truth about today's Democratic Senate. If the far left hates it, it ain't happening. That's true with health care, too. The middle class is being plummeted by Obamacare. A recent study showed that an average 27-year-old Kentuckian from Taylor County saw his premium skyrocket by almost 60% this year. Constituents like him are looking to Washington for leadership and for solutions. But Senate Democrats won't even allow sensible bipartisan health care solutions to come to a vote. Instead, we just get more politics. Like the legislation we hear may be coming up later this week, a tactic designed by the Democratic Campaign Committee to make Americans forget that Democrats voted to raid Medicare by $700 billion to fund new Obamacare spending. Every Democrat in the Senate on Christmas Eve 2009, without exception, voted to take $700 billion out of Medicare to help fund Obamacare. Senate Democrats are actually trying to distract from their votes to raid Medicare by making it even harder to save and strengthen Medicare. But Americans won't forget that the sponsors of the proposal were the very same people who voted to raid Medicare in the first place through Obamacare. And they won't forget what happened last week either, when Republicans advanced a series of bills aimed at increasing flexibility in the workplace and boosting upward mobility. We thought Democrats might want to work with us in a bipartisan manner to move these bills forward, but apparently the far left won't let them. Democratic leadership won't even consider legislation I introduced that would help more moms and dads work from home while caring for young children. My bill aims to bring tax policy in line with what life's really like for working parents, and it would help young families save on child care costs too. But like I said, Senate Democrats have just gone campaigning. For the Democratic leadership, helping the middle class seems to be far from priority one. But the middle class needs help right now. And the only way to offer working moms and struggling college graduates real solutions is to break through the Senate Democratic logjam. There are two ways to accomplish that. Either our friends on the other side can get serious about working for the people who elected them, or the people who elected them can make the decision for them.